I'd like to take a moment to thank ReviewFix.com for syndicating the Artists Dojo on their website. ReviewFix.com, your one-stop shop for music, games, film, comics, and pro wrestling reviews and news. ReviewFix.com. Visit them now. Welcome to the Artist Dojo, where I will be speaking with artists, craftspeople, and creatives of all disciplines in order to see how they navigate living a life in the arts. I'm your host, Afrim Jambalai, and today's guest is Jamie Burton Oare. She's an award-winning director whose feature film directorial debut, Doing the LA Thing, premiered at American Black Film Festival in 2008. Jamie was nominated for the Best Director First Feature Award at the Pan-African Film Festival, and she was the winner of the HBO Best Feature Award at the Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival. Jamie's short film, The Bully, garnered the Best Short Film Award at the Boca Black Film Festival. Soulful Steps is her first feature-length documentary and premiered at the 16th Annual Martha's Vineyard African American Film Festival in 2018 and won Best Documentary at the Trinity International Film Festival in Detroit, Michigan in 2019. Jamie has a bachelor's of business administration and marketing from Howard University, and she completed film school at Los Angeles City College and earned a master's of fine arts in screenwriting from Cal State University, Northridge. Her films are produced through her production company, Jomaja Films, and she is a native to Flint, Michigan, which is the foundation for much of her work. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Jamie, thank you for being on the Artist Dojo.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited because when we first met, it was through a mutual, I can't even say acquaintance because he's like family, Gregory, who's, my manager, kind of the first person who really gave me a shot in the acting world to take the next step up in a lot of the things I've been doing. And he introduced me to you and the project that you were doing about Eric Garner. It's a film that you wrote, directed, produced, edited. So your mark is all over the work in a very I have to say, and I mentioned this before, on social media and to a few people, but the vibe that you created on the set and for the project as a whole really um, it, it it let everybody know the intensity of the project, but at the same time, you really created this open space for creativity, for new ideas, and but also at the same time, you had a very specific vision. So I was kind of blown away at how you were able to juggle all those elements, and I know it was a lot because that was like a whirlwind few days on set outside there, and where we were shooting. So yeah, I can compliment you all day, but I'm just like super excited that I have you on today, and we'll talk more about that and kind of pick your brain. What's new aside from the uh, the film premiering in a couple of days, in basically like a week and a half, maybe?
Yeah.
What else you got going on?
So I am my next project, which I'm already into, is a documentary, tentatively titled "Searching for Black Gold," about an incredible man, James Wheeler, who when we finish this project, he should be known as the largest collector of African American cinema and art in the world. He's my dear friend, Ali Wheeler, and Alima Wheeler's dad. So I knew him, and he had an impact on my career choice. Um, in high school, I met him in high school. He's from Detroit, and you would go to his home, and he would show you, his collection, and you learned about the movie Sweetback before anybody else was talking about it, by Melvin Van Peebles.
Yeah,
And he collected black movie posters, original posters. So it's a pleasure. Now I'm helping to bring his documentary to life. So that's next.
yeah, I definitely. That's really beautiful. I love those moments where, especially someone in their youth, those formative years, when you see those things, especially when no one else sees it, or it's not in the kind of commonplace knowledge until like 20, 30 years later, really. So I can only imagine. I would love to pick your brain a little bit about what those moments must have been like, especially as a kid, to like
Yeah.
walk in and see those. Because I'm assuming all on film. He probably was like a, you know, how was he playing? Was it like a projector?
So, well, in his home, for example, you walk in and he had a soundy, which is really the first music video recording device, but it played short black films, which we now call music videos. And he had that in his home. Um, he had items that I remember him telling me that Lena Horne was trying to acquire a piece from him and he wouldn't give it to her
It feels
because
like walking into like a like almost like if you walked into like a scientist's laboratory, you're probably just I mean, it's blowing me away just thinking about it, so I can only imagine
very
what it must be.
very much so. It's like their home. They lived. Ali and Alima lived in a museum, and so the film. He would tell us things and talk about the film. So I went off on my own to watch Sweetback, but I learned about it from him, as all of us did. It was kind of like a little running joke. But I didn't know that it was laying this solidifying a foundation for me. I didn't really know. I just knew I was fascinated and I thought it was cool. And I had a job in college at a movie theater. And one of the reasons I took the job is because I was like, oh, I'm going to collect Black movie posters like Mr. Wheeler. And I did that in my first apartment in New York. You walked in and there were original Black movie posters on the wall. And I knew the difference. I knew the difference because that's what he did. He knew art. So
I love
for
that.
them to come to me and trust me with that, the task is I don't take it lightly.
Yeah. Well, I don't think for any of us in those formative years, we don't necessarily know when it's happening, but when you do look back on it, you're like, oh wow, that set the foundation for a lot of how you move forward. Um, so I'll jump into one of the first questions that I like to ask, which is, um, in the past, artists were an integral part of society and culture, from storytellers to griots, tribal elders, iconoclasts, etc. Do you think that the artist is still an integral part of today's society?
I think that the answer is yes. Not necessarily acknowledged as such. That word artist is kind of, I'm sorry, it should be off. It's kind of loosely used. I'm gonna turn off this phone so we don't have those interruptions.
It's okay.
It's
It's
kind
real
of
life.
loosely used. I know. It's loosely used, and so I don't know that people necessarily like take it as serious. Like you kind of have to grow into the word and what it means for you. And I'll say for me, it's very much the basis of who I am and what I do. I think that you can kind of have aspirations like, oh, I want to be a movie star, or I want to be my name in lights, and you can have that, and that can fuel you to a degree, but you will run out of gas if that's all there is. So you have to love the art that you're pursuing and that you're growing into and that you are planning to share with the world, or else you won't last. You won't last. And it won't be fulfilling. And I know this because I had similar aspirations, and it wasn't, thankfully it wasn't the meat of my pursuit. It was, I remember having an issue in college because I was very good in math and science. I am very good in math and science, and I come from Michigan, which is a General Motors town. Flint is very much that. So I was inundated with pre-engineering and all those types of courses in the gifted program, but it was all geared toward primarily to math and science. So they talk about STEM, but I grew up in STEM. And so for me, knowing and getting introduced to theater in the fifth grade and having this love for it and then performing again in the 6th grade at my graduation, imitating my teacher boldly in front of everyone, including him. I got a high off that. And then I was inundated with music as well because that was a part of the curriculum. And so for me, I had all these layers that kind of were laid down that, like you said earlier, I wasn't necessarily aware of how that was going to impact my decision. So anyway, I needed scholarship money to go to college. Like my mom taught me, your grades are going to be your ticket. And so I made sure that I did well in school, and I had this explorer spirit. I knew I wanted to go away. I watched the Cosby Show, and so I was introduced, and I knew I wanted to go to Howard University, and so I got there by any means necessary. So for me, I got there through academic scholarship, and I chose business as my major because I knew no matter what I did, I would have my own business. That much I knew, and so I remember being there, and I'm like, oh, I'll just minor in theater when I get to college. And they told me, you can't minor in theater. You have a comprehensive major. So my degree is a BBA, and it's all of business administration. And I said, well, let me pick the most creative aspect of business, which was marketing. And then I just took extra classes for theater on top of that. And I remember, like, being in my theater classes and walking across campus. I can go to this moment very vividly, alone, going towards the School of Business, and it seemed like it was in the evening. And I recall having a conversation with God, basically saying, I know I want to go pursue theater full time. And the conversation kind of went like this, you know, but is my pursuit vain? I know I want the fame and the attention from it. I wanted that. And then God was basically the clear thought. When I say God, for me, it's a clear thought. The God voice came back to me basically saying, but Jamie, if you were to pursue being a doctor or a lawyer, wouldn't you want to be the best? Wouldn't you still have that desire? And I was like, I would. So then I thought about, it was at a time I was actually studying the Bible, and I had read Ecclesiastes, which nobody ever reads at that time. And it pretty much was saying there's vanity in all things. And so what came back to me was, but that's not the core reason. The reason I fell in love with acting was because I'm obsessed with human behavior. I'm obsessed with why people do what they do. And I love when it makes sense to me, even if it doesn't make sense to others. And so the best way to get inside of a condition or a reason is to put yourself in those circumstances. So to me, that's what acting is.
Yeah.
So when that all that came to me in this walk, and then I said, okay, I'm going. Like, it doesn't matter what other people think, as long as I know the real reason, and that becomes the main reason, I'm good. And so then that was my green light. That was it. That moment was, I'm going forward. And I didn't tell anybody really. My mom always kind of knew, and set me up to do whatever I wanted to do. So I didn't feel that pressure people have from their parents of, but that's weird and you need a backup plan. Like, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my business degree, and then I'm just going to go to New York when I finish, because all the great actors come from New York.
Well, it didn't seem like there
So
was a second guessing there. So usually when there's not a second guessing, the it's yeah, it's interesting because I'm taking in a few of the things that you said, and it seems like from the term artistry and from your choices and things you've done, it's more of a spiritual pursuit than a physical pursuit. Though that is obviously part of the, because you're the physical instrument, you are the person that's creating, or potentially the vessel for creation. But it seems like more of a spiritual pursuit for you than the other way, because you had that conversation basically with yourself. And I've been there too, where I thought, I'm like, am I doing this because, and maybe honestly in the beginning it was fun because you kind of get the attention, you get eyes on you, and like you said, you get a little bit of a high doing the performance, and you're like, oh, this is crazy. But as you mature and realize, like, well, then what is my responsibility to this? So I know for me, yeah, I enjoy the who doesn't, you have a great performance and someone's like, man, that was really great, or this work was beautiful. And you're like, oh, thank you. Like you take that to heart. But knowing the
Yeah,
responsibility of like, so me as a young kid watching, let's say, Bruce Lee films. My dad passed away when I
yeah,
was very young, so I always kind of looked up to see like who was the altruistic hero male figure that did the right thing but was also tough and had style. And there's so many people to look up
yeah.
to. And so I thought to myself, I was like, yeah, that's kind of my responsibility, because if I have the wherewithal to know that I was handed the baton, so to speak, I have to run with
Hmm.
it. I can't kinda stand there and
Yeah,
pose and take the photos, and I mean, maybe occasionally, but the direction is forward.
I love that. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. I can relate
s
to that fully.
so you kind of answered it, but, I'd like to ask the question, do you see yourself as an artist, craftsperson, both, neither, something else, altogether?
Both, and probably something I haven't even considered, because it's interesting. Like, there's some really wild things happening with Breathe, which, we'll get into a little bit, but it's almost like, let's say for a second you lose sight and start getting caught up into the accolades or whatever can come from it. It's like God reminds me, this is bigger than what you thought. And the reason is deeper than what you thought. And I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of knew that. Let me get into my groove. And I say that because, so definitely an artist, because I feel like artistry is about taking your experience and how you see things and sharing it for the purpose of relation, for someone being able to relate. And ultimately, when you can relate to someone, it provides levity. So it's like it's like medicine for living.
Hmm,
Wow, I like that. That never came to me before. I like that. Yeah. Artistry is like medicine for living. And so I definitely feel that that's part of my journey. A craftsman or craftswoman, because I believe in studying and learning and knowing what I'm doing and applying, so I'm a nerd in that regard. I like to go deep. I want to know what my options are, and I want to grow and continually grow. And so I'm definitely a crafts person, woman. And then the part of, you know, something else is just always leaving room for whatever I don't know to come
I
in.
love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. So you basically said you got bit by the bug when you were younger. So was that part? What would you say then is the initial inspiration? Can you distill it down to maybe that first moment when you realized, or maybe looking back on it now, that you wanted to be an artist or a craft woman, and specific moment
Yeah.
maybe?
I can. It's so funny. I always say in the fifth grade, when I was cast in a play, our class did a play called Many Moons. And I was cast as the understudy for the magician role under Michael Mason. I still remember all the details. And so that meant I got a guaranteed performance. Miss Banks and Miss Hearn were my teachers, and I was in a public school gifted program. And I was like, okay. I was also the stage manager, so we had different roles. But when I got on that stage as the magician, it was like something else was inside of me. It was like a green light to just kind of go. And I loved it. And I remember thinking, I should be the magician the whole time. Michael Mason shouldn't be the magician. I remember thinking that. And he probably would laugh if he heard that. But, that moment was like, I wanted to hold on to that. But as I was thinking about that right now, I remember, I think we might have been 5 or 6. My family, we used to watch the movie Sparkle with Lynette McKee and Philip Michael Thomas, who is
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Greg's dear friend. And I knew that movie backwards and forward. I don't know why I was 5 or 6 watching that movie, but
It was a different
it was
time. We were
heavy.
we were we were watching movies that, you know, like, I mean,
I
I
know. But actually, it's a good thing
yeah,
though,
yeah.
because what I took from it at that age, my cousins, Tamika and Voncel, we did a talent show in my backyard. Okay, so I have a really tight block in Flint, Michigan. I'm friends and family with the people to this day. And we did a talent show in the backyard and we charged a quarter to get in. And we performed, giving him something he could feel. We performed that and we were little kids and people showed up and we had these chairs and I remember it so vividly. And it's funny because each one of us kind of, I played the Irene Cara part in my head, and my cousin Vaughn was older. She played the older sister, and then my cousin Tamika was like, Sparkle. And so that moment, as you asked that question, I remember that moment. But I think in
Wow.
fifth grade was when I said, "Yeah, I want to do this."
There's something, it's interesting because even a previous guest that I had on was talking about like doing the performances on the block, and there's something to it. I think as receiving enough of the support, even to do that, but then also going out on your own and charging a quarter for it. It's like there was always the impulse seemed like it was there early, that wanting to, well, also when you said you were stage managing, you kind of had
Yeah,
like a little bit of everything right from the jump. So that's pretty amazing.
that's true. I didn't think about that. That is very true.
Yeah. And then also the
Hmm.
math and the science stuff, like it's all, it's funny when you don't fight the flow, all the skills come
Mm,
together and meet, you know? So, like, all these
mm.
things that everyone seemingly is like, "There's no way that these 2 things connect," you know?
Yeah,
Science, math, stage managing, directing, performance and acting.
yeah.
You know how to communicate with actors and people on set because you yourself have done a little bit of all of it. Like, that's kind of it's interesting, like, finding the connection there. The next thing I want to ask is how do you navigate the practical aspects of life with your creative pursuits? Is there such thing as a
Okay.
work-life balance?
So for me, I had a plan that when I had that moment at Howard University, my big thing was I need to get to New York City. I knew the best actors, in my opinion, came from there. And my mother, I used to have real serious body issues. I was stick thin and I didn't like that. And my mother used to tell me, I can't wait till you go to somewhere like New York where people are going to just love you and you walk down the street and there's so many different people. You're not going to be thinking about that. And so I had an internship. I didn't care what internship. I worked for the Bank of New York. I just needed to get to New York. And once I got there, for the summer where I could really be in the city, my mom's words were true. And I started to just gain a lot more confidence. Um, and so when I was back, at Howard, and I actually had an opportunity to leave school to go model in Europe, and I was like, I can't do that. I got to go back to Howard. I'm not missing any semesters. But in that world, I was old, to 19, 20-year old in the modeling world. So I went back to school, but in my head, I was like, I'm going to New York City. And I knew that I would, if I couldn't get a job, I would waitress, you know, and that was my plan. And so, practically speaking, when I was graduating, I looked for jobs that could send me to New York. And I got passed up on one with an ad agency, and my mom, they flew me out there, and I was like, damn, this isn't the way. I thought this was the way. I was super disappointed. And my mom was like, well, God is going to open another door, which I couldn't see. So I went back to Flint and I started waitressing that summer at Applebee's in preparation to waitress in New York. And so I General Motors offered me, I had an internship with them, and they offered me a job in Detroit, and I turned it down. It's like, nope. And my god sister who worked at GM, she was like, you know, the CEO, because I was the first Flint enroader. This program called Inroads for minorities, and I would drive to Detroit to be a part of it. And I was the oldest one. So she says, you met the CEO, you need to call him. And I was like, what? Like, I'm not doing that. I was afraid. But then I did it. I called and was like, what the hell? And I told him I wanted to get to New York. And he was like, why? You know, and I said, well, I want to pursue an MBA JD program. They had it like Fordham. And he was like, okay. But the truth is, I wanted to be there for acting, but I couldn't tell him that, you know. And the unique thing about this CEO, Bill Lovejoy, is he was from Flatbush, and he was a
Okay.
Jewish white guy. Yeah, and I was like, a white dude from Flatbush, and I didn't know about the Jewish culture there. So I was like, I mean, I when I went there for the summer, I learned, but I just didn't connect, and I was like, you're from Flatbush? And so he and I connected, and he played basketball and I played basketball. So I asked him, hey,
Yeah,
I want to go to New York.
Erasmus High School was my zoned high school in Flatbush where I grew up. So it was funny because there's a whole like,
What?
yeah, yeah, it's like all the things that tie stuff together. Because yeah, there was a huge community like early, could be like 40 years ago at this point or more. At that point in Erasmus, and then just like any neighborhood over time, like it changes. It goes through phases, and then
Yeah,
there's all the political business behind all the gentrification and stuff that happens now. But
yeah.
neighborhoods change. Like Flatbush, a large part of Flatbush is now called Ditmas Park. So and
Oh,
that was the
wow.
neighborhood that I grew up in. And when I go back, people are like, "Oh, I love Ditmas Park." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, where
In
are we?
Flatbush?
What timeline did I arrive in?" But anyway, sorry
Yeah, it's
to interrupt.
no,
But you had a
I
crystal
love
clear. It seems like you had a crystal clear plan. Despite the bumps along the way, you were like, "All right, this is my goal. I got to get to New York. I'm going to prepare myself." I love that you prepared being a server or waitress in Flint first, because you
Yep,
knew, I was like, I need that skill to have in New
yeah,
York City. So it's amazing to me that you had such wherewithal. I feel like, with exception of a few moments in my teens and 20s, I was really like a dodo bird, you know? So to hear you talking about how you had the wherewithal to kind of know and set that crystal clear goal and do it. So then,
yeah,
in regard to work-life balance part of the question,
yes.
is it by any means necessary to pursue the goal and kind of allow, like you said before, like allow space for other things?
Absolutely. And for me it was whichever way. You know, I ended up getting that job in New York. Bill Lovejoy created that job for me at General Motors in New York. So I was in Purchase, New York, which was right next to White Plains. And so I was blessed. I moved there with a $40,000 a year job, you know, in 1997. So I had money.
Yeah,
And then what I did was I found my way to the city and just, you know, started to take theater classes. And so the work life balance part for me, it was the work, the job was going to serve my ability to be an artist. You know, that was the whole premise. Like, I need something because you output so much as an artist before you get any money. So I was like, I need a way to fund this. So the funding was going to be waitressing, and then I was blessed to get the job at General Motors. So I used that. And then it becomes a time issue because you're dedicating time to this job. Excuse me. And I hear people say, you know, you shouldn't have a backup, or you know, it's all in, you know. And to me, that message depends on the person, because if I was willing to work 8 hours to pay for my dream and then work another 8 hours to pursue my dream, how much more all in can you be? You
That sounds
know,
like a
I
plan.
didn't.
That sounds like a all-in plan A to me. Because if it's
It
supporting, and
was,
I've said
yeah,
this before, but if what you're doing supports the dream, then it's it's perfect. I mean, yeah, obviously, do artists and creatives want 100% of their income to come from the creative endeavor that they're doing? Yes, who doesn't? But in those realistic spaces where you're like, yeah, I work a full-time job. I purposefully work a job that allows me to get writing done, get reading done,
yes,
so it's like,
yes.
yeah, it's in support of that. So I think that to me is all in. So
That's all in, and that to me, so that balance piece, um, I still always consider my job to be in service of my art. So that meant it's a certain freedom there. So I can leave. I'm not tied to the corporate BS. I'm not tied to any of that because then my focus is this is just money for me to do my thing, you know. So I have always been about, you know, if you love art and you're what you're doing, you're gonna find a way to do it. And for me, having an income gives me more peace of mind to pursue my art versus being stressed out about how I'm gonna eat. Like I can't if I'm not if my nutrients aren't met and I'm not, you know, my hunger isn't satisfied, I can't think about something else, you know. So to me, I made that decision. Well, I'm gonna find my what I always anybody who knows me knows my famous words are artist hustle. That's what I always called it, my artist hustle. And once I got into New York and I worked at GM up until a certain point when I had got deep in the theater and then I was ready to figure out how to do this on a daily basis. I quit my job and I told my boss I had just done really well at some presentation. Brian, what was Brian's last name? Evans? I can't remember his last name. But I told him I had lunch with him and I said, Brian, I have to tell you something. And he's like, what? I said, I have to quit. I'm going to pursue my dreams as an actor. And I told him, and Jesus told me to tell you because that's, I felt that so strong. And he just stared at me and he said, make sure you invite me to your first Broadway show. And tears ran down my face.
uh,
It was deep. It was a deep spiritual moment because this man made my exit easy. He told everybody for me. They told me if I ever needed to come back, I was welcome. And like that was huge. And I happily went from working there to working at Barnes and Noble in the Village because I had to have a job. I didn't know.
yeah,
I've
yeah.
been working since I was 13. So for me, I'm like I still got to have a job. So I went to work at this bookstore and then I started auditioning every day. You know, I knew how to audition. I knew how to make this real and then I was doing background work. So I finally found that shift of how to be an actor every day. But yeah, so that was that. And I got fired from Barnes and Noble. I like to say that was the only job I got fired from. And the lyric that would go through my head, I still does. I used to work at Foot Locker. They fired me in front. It was Lauren Hill. She said that in one of her rhymes and I laughed because I kind of was like, you guys are firing me? Like, are you serious? And they fired me because I left too much. I went out of town to go to the at the time Acapulco Black Film Festival because my art was my priority.
Hey,
So
that's I've it's really funny because I think early on with jobs, I would like get nervous about telling them like and finding ways to like finagle time away from work so I could go and do auditions and stuff like that. But then now literally any job I've had in the last, I don't know how long, but I tell them from the jump, I'm like, hey, listen, this respectfully, I'll do all that's required of me for the job, but this job is not my life's
this is
priority.
my life.
I was like, I will absolutely be respectful. I will agree to the things I do, but my priorities are X, Y, and Z. And the funny thing is, you lay it
That's
out at the top. Typically, things work out pretty well. Like thus far, knock on wood,
yeah.
thank God, I haven't had any issues with needing time to audition or booking a gig and then having to go away to do that. And so Anyway, that's really funny. Yeah, it's I think it's something about like openly stating the intention, because if you would have said, "Hey, I'm done. I'm leaving," you know, that creates some story in this person's head, but you basically like put it out there and said like I have this spiritual calling for this thing. And anyone who's a receptive human being, I think, can't deny the feeling that comes over them
Yeah,
when they see someone in that state. It's a really powerful
yeah,
thing. So,
I like that. Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so what strategies do you use to overcome creative blocks or periods of low inspiration?
So I learned something. A friend of mine, Angela Nirvana, she said something years ago that stayed with me. And she had to take, she had a kid and she decided, I'm taking, I got to go raise my kid. And basically, she's an actress too. And she said, I got to go do some living. Basically, that's what she said. And it sat with me. And what she was implying was, I need to have some life to give to the work. And it marinated with me. And so for me, honestly, at this point, I don't even classify or see periods where it could be perceived as low inspiration. I don't see it like that. I have to live, and part of living is what's going to give me something to say. Like Sade, she says it best. I'm not making an album until I have something to say, right? And so I think that I don't even live in that space. So I don't ever feel like I'm dealing with low levels of inspiration.
It's
I
funny
don't
because
even.
I kind of I knew that in asking you the question, just inferring off of what we were talking about, because I think everyone that I've spoken to that has this is not to belittle or demean anyone else, but if people who are typically on a spiritual calling or have that feeling behind their work, um, it seems like a fire that's always lit, you know, to some degree. And yes, of course, there are challenges along the way, but
Yes.
um, yeah, typically, I don't think inspiration is the thing, but maybe the
Yeah.
creative blocks portion. Do you find that that is something that happens occasionally, or you need moments to like one thing I can recall on set is you did take a moment at one point, like you didn't as rushed and kind of crazy as things started to get at a certain point, which happens on any set, you know. I think you very much took a moment and were like considered what was going on, and I remember that pretty
Mm.
clearly. So is that something that you do typically, where you just like take a moment to really consider what maybe the options are, what the moves are to make?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I think that all that it is remembering why. You know, is like literally stopping and remembering why. Why am I doing this? And how do I get to the next step? Because filmmaking is problem solving, and creative problem solving. And so blocks, like for example, let's say I'm writing a script. That's really tough because it's a discipline involved. For me, I'll dedicate a certain amount of pages each day, usually get them done in the first half of the day. And they could be garbage. So that's a block in a way because it's not flowing, but it's like you still kind of working a muscle, and you're trusting that if I just do something, the channel is open. And
Hmm.
I believe that we're vessels. We're unique vessels. We're very unique vessels. So it's like my vessel can receive the information and what I'm getting from above to release. So if anything, how I deal with a block is to create a discipline or a structure for the thing to get done. For example, I had a block with I was editing Soulful Steps, the documentary on soul line dancing, and I had an editor. He had some life challenges and he couldn't continue, and I was like, damn, I gotta I gotta do this. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to edit. That's usually always the case. um, but I had to. And literally, I was working at Film LA, a full time job, And God, in a clear thought, said to me, just come home and do an hour each day. And if you know anything about editing, which you do, that's nothing. An hour, you can't do anything in an hour. And I was thinking, like, how am I going to do that? That's nothing. But instead of fighting that, because I had nothing else, that's what I started doing. And after probably a few weeks of discipline, it turned into something. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to get home to do this part. And it just kind of built that way.
Yeah, the
Right.
discipline
So
creates the excitement almost.
yeah, it creates, and it's there when if you're not thinking so much and you just doing, then it's like it provides the environment for things to flow.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
Just an hour a day. I mean, yeah, and then it's really just chiseling away little by little, and it gets done. So
exactly.
that's a really great piece of advice.
Yeah.
You kind of answered this. How do you handle financial challenges that often come up as an artist? You said that you just kind of prepare yourself. You feel like it was funny because last episode I talked a little bit about how some people can create in that, and again, it's not a judgment. Like some people will create in that survival state, that like bohemian artist kind of space,
Yeah.
but then other people don't want to do that because maybe for whatever reasons it could be triggering to past experiences, or you feel like you're cut off from the creative aspect if you're in survival mode. So I guess all of that is to say, the what you've mentioned prior is like having that preparation financially, so that way you can have a freedom to the creativity, so it's not
Yeah.
something that comes out of like a pure survival mode, like I don't know where my next meal's coming from kind of thing.
Yeah. I think so for example, my budget for Breathe, I didn't reach my goal. I raised enough to go through production, and then I was like, I'll figure it out after that, right? So um an opportunity came up for me to get into education again, because substitute teaching has been my long-term artist hustle. But I left teaching in 2013. I was like, I'm done with that. Um, and here we are, 2022. An opportunity came for me to go back into education, or go forward. I don't like saying go back, go forward
Hmm.
into education. And I was like, oh, this is great, because now I'll have money to, submit to festivals and do the post production finish. So I didn't care that the money didn't come from an outside source. I'm going to pay for it. So that's I got to get it done. So that's my dedication. So I went into that job and did my thing in that job, and took that money and finished the film, right? Um so for me, again, it's just
Self-reliance
it's a
seems like.
muscle that, yeah, I don't, it's a muscle I've been working forever.
Mm.
So it was like, and then I could take a break from, you know you never take a break from creative, but I could take a break from like so focused, laser focused on it, that I could step back and have an objective point of view, which helped me in my editing process. Because like I said, I don't usually like to edit. I said I'm going to stop saying that, but it's the truth. But I got in a situation again where I had to edit, and my dedication to seeing the project complete is greater than anything else. So in that process, I'm like, okay, cool. Let me take this job in education. Somebody say a break. For me, that's a break, because it's something I can do in my sleep. Um, and uh, and so yeah, I did that. I'm doing that, and it's like that's funding me to go on these trips to the festivals.
Yeah.
I don't have to like, like it's like you see ahead. Like I don't have to. Oh my God, how nobody's donating. I can no. I get a check. I can pay for my ticket. Let's go. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, you seem to
it's
have a
just
little
my
bit of a bird's eye view of things, where it's not just like what's right in front of you kind of a thing. You're like, hey, I'll do this, and I'm adaptable. Some people unfortunately aren't adaptable, or they haven't allowed themselves to flex that muscle, to exercise that muscle, so to speak, of being adaptable. I started with acting. So then, all the video stuff and the editing and the audio, and I'm not the greatest at it, but I'm doing it enough to a point where I'm able to, interview great guests like you, and chop up these videos and put them together. So, if that kind of mixed with your advice says anything, is like, sometimes you just have to work out that side of yourself that you didn't know you had, to get it done.
Absolutely. And you do a great job. You do a phenomenal job. So it's like you're dedicated to your vision and your goal, and you're like, "Hey, if I got to do this part and I didn't want to do it or I didn't know how, then guess what? I'm going to learn because the goal is more important to me." And that's what it is, you know. That's what
Yeah.
it is.
What role does networking and building relationships play in your artistic journey?
So it's very interesting. I've had a very adversarial relationship with the word networking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I feel you. I feel you on that, because it has like a
Yeah.
icky connotation to it. Sometimes it feels false, right? Like networking is like, hey, oh, what are you up to? Oh, what are you up to? Like almost like a false rubbing elbows kind of thing.
Yeah, we got that at Howard in the School of B. You got to learn how to network. And I used to struggle with that until I realized it's just talking to people and
Being a human being.
that's it. And I'm like, why do they call it networking? Um, but it does make relationships
Mm,
play a big part in the work. Um, you never know when or how someone's going to be a part of a project. You need an editor or a songwriter or whatever, and you realize, oh, I know this person or I know that person. So it's very interesting. This work we do is not, you can't do it alone. Um, my name might be on some things and it looks like done a lot. 9 times out of 10, I didn't want to. That's just what it is. And but there's no way like I could make any film, and nor do I desire to by myself. And especially as you get older, it's boring. you know I don't want to do, I want to celebrate with everybody who's a part of it. I
yeah.
don't want to celebrate with strangers only. So it's no fun to just do it alone. I mean, but I am the type, I'm gonna get it done. So it is what it is. And I'm not putting my name on something that I didn't do. I won't give myself credit for anything I didn't do. That's not happening. So sink or swim, I got to take that responsibility.
Yeah.
So
Seems like you have like a
uh
solo integrity, but also wanting to have it be a communal experience as well.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, what impact does your personal environment or workspace have on your creative output? So, I
Oh,
guess,
that's a good one.
are you I asked this of a lot of people, like, do you work best in the center of a tornado, or do you want things to be peaceful and chill and kind of like everything in its right place, somewhere in between?
I think I would work best if things are peaceful and chill, but that's not always what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh and it's good to know how to navigate chaos because like on a film set is something's gonna happen. And you better know how to deal with it.
Hmm.
You better have some experience or else you're gonna cost the day, and that's not what you want to do. So I try. I try to prepare for the best environment I can, and I do what I can to create a certain environment, but it's not it's not what actually happens always.
Yeah.
So I think it's important though, like the whole feng shui and having air is important to me, being able to breathe, not being crowded and cramped.
Mm.
Those are things I like. But like, we were shooting one day and we had a small space for our holding area, and you got to figure it out. I might go to the bathroom. I got to go to the bathroom, but I'm really going to have
Take a moment.
some
Yeah.
quiet to yeah. So, but environment is really important. It really is. And more than anything, the people you're around,
Mm.
the energies you're around. For me, I can feel. I'm very sensitive. I can feel people, and um, I like to have, people with good intentions around me
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this next one, I think, will be a good segue into talking about breathe a little bit. So, how do you decide which projects to pursue and which to pass on? So, a second part to that question: when you started writing this, um, what was the impulse? There's some inherent challenges just regarding the subject matter and the way that you had envisioned it. Um, for anyone wondering, obviously the story is about Eric Gardner. Full blessing of the family, full
Yep.
blessing
Yeah.
of SAG-AFTRA.
Mhm.
During these times of strike, that this is premiering. So you got the green light. I love the term that you use, like those green lights coming
Yeah.
up. But can you talk a little bit about that and what motivated it initially? What kept it going forward? Even after the script process, when you read it and were like, do I do this? Is this just like a personal creative thing that I say I wrote and didn't do? But you went all the way. So can you talk to me a little bit about that process?
Yeah. So, this was born in 2014, which is when Eric Garner was killed. Um, I was in my last semester of grad school for screenwriting, and I had to take a short film class. And I was a little bit snobbish about that. I was like, I know a short film class. I don't want to take this. But it fit my schedule. I needed this elective, and I was like, all right. So I took the class, and I had this incredible professor who was a producer, and she was like, hey, we're gonna write a short film. We're gonna work on this short film all semester. So it's like, okay, what do I write? And it was August of 2014. This happened July 2014. So it was fresh and vivid, and I just got the inspiration to write about it. We performed our scripts. Well, we read them, had readings at the end. And my professor at the end of class, she pulled me over, and she told me personally, you have to make this film. And I knew inside, I felt it, but she told me that. I said, oh, it's going to happen. Because for me, when I went to grad school, I went there to have a structure to create work for myself. So I was like, when I finished, I had 10 years worth of work I could do. So if nobody ever hired me, I could do one project. The last 2 years, I had enough material. So I finished, and then I started to kind of reach out. I reached out to Emerald early on, which is Eric Garner's daughter. I reached out to Ramsey Orta early on, who filmed the incident.
Hmm.
Um, and I got some replies. I had money. I had somebody who was going to give me 10,000, and then that didn't work out. So I put it down. Fast 4 years later, I was asked to produce a short, and that short had a lot of the elements that Breathe has. So when I finished, it was like God said, "Hey, hey, remember Breathe, and you can produce this now." And I was like, "Oh my God, everything I thought I couldn't do or needed, I can do." So that's what happened. It was quick. So when that came, I went back and got the script, revamped it. I reached out to Emerald again. I reached out to Ramsey again, and they both said, "We're still with it," which was a huge blessing. And I could have made it without their permission, but I didn't want to do that because I
There's
didn't
some
want to do.
there's something to the fact that they connected with it. I think
Yeah,
that lends to the respect that you carried the whole project with.
thank you. And so it just was happening fast. So then here comes June. I was like, I got to do a GoFundMe, my first. I had not used the crowdsourcing yet. So I did that. Are you still there?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Oh, oh, your screen went blank. Okay. So I did that, and I started raising money, and I called Stephen Hill, who was my very first choice. I spoke to him at a film festival, ABFF, in 2017, and I told him, "Hey," he didn't know that I had wanted him. I said, "Hey, I have a project. I want you to play Eric Garner." And he was interested, and he read it, and he was like, "Let's go." And subsequently he booked Magnum PI, and his star started rising. So I didn't know if he would still be with it. So I came back to him, and he's like, "Let's go." And that was it. That
Yeah,
was when that
he
happened. I
was
pulled the
great.
trigger. If I had $1 million to make this film, he was still my number one choice. So for me, that was like huge. Um, and I pulled the trigger, and we went forward, and everything just was lining up. And then of course we had crazy obstacles. Um, I wanted to shoot in New York City. New York City gave me the runaround. One could say sabotaged.
Yeah.
But you can't do that to me. Once I have my mandate and I feel like God is saying go, that's it. So this guy on the phone that I was talking to about cop cars, he said, "What about Jersey?" And I started looking in Jersey, and I was started corresponding with Newark because elements of it looked like Staten Island.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, I forgot until I was in the process. And again, God said, "Don't forget about Mitty." I was like, "Oh my God, Mitty. Mitty is my friend. Mitty is Amiri Baraka Jr. from the great playwright poet Amiri Baraka. He's his son. And Mitty is the chief of staff in Newark, New Jersey. And his brother, Raz Baraka, is the mayor." So I needed political support, I needed the police to support me because I didn't want opposition while filming. And that's when you're doing permits in a city, the police are usually in charge. And so I called Mitty and said, "Hey, I need to come shoot this short in your city, Eric Garner, blah, blah, blah." He said, "Let's go." Without hesitation. He hadn't read a script. He was like, "Let's go." And so when you talk about relationships,
Oh yeah.
okay, this is my Howard University brother. Mitty and I had a class together. Black philosophy is where I met him. I don't even know if he remembers it was that class. And he was so cool. And I just always liked Mitty. And who knew? And if it weren't for Mitty, I would have been shooting guerrilla in New York City. I may not have gotten my shots. It might have been a disaster, but that was perfect alignment. That was God. And so we went forward. So at that point, you can't tell me no. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
mean,
It doesn't
I'm
matter
like,
what.
I'm blown away by the whole thing because as we're having this conversation and we're, talking a little bit about networking, and you said, no, it's more relationships. Like you actually never know when you're establishing yourself in a relationship with somebody that later, just by the nature of knowing the quality of human being that you are, the work that you do, it was just like a yes on just general principle of like hearing you ask the question. So it's
Mm,
it's beautiful. You get this inspiration from source,
yeah.
creator inspiration, clear idea, like you say, and it's just yeah, I'm blown away by it. The fact that like
It's
when you really continue to, because you could have very easily said, they're not going to let me shoot in New York, I can't do it. And how
yeah.
many times in life do we kind of get caught in those things where the initial no that comes before us automatically shuts the whole thing down, you know?
Absolutely. Keenan Ivory Wayans said something years ago. I heard it on a, I don't even know. I remember I was in White Plains and I was watching something and he said, no doesn't mean no. It means not at this time.
Mm,
And, and I live with that. And so, but yeah, like, and it's funny going back to the relationship piece. For me, I met Mitty and he was a cool dude. I didn't know who his father was. I knew him as Mitty. I didn't know he was Amiri Baraka's son.
yeah.
I just knew Mitty. And it didn't matter to me. You see, like I don't care who your mom and dad are, other than the fact that I respect them because they're your mother and father. For me, I don't care about that. I gravitate towards who I like, you know, and it's almost a pleasant surprise when you discover, oh, this person happens to be connected this way. So I think when you pursue somebody because of who they are, it's different. Let me say that again. When you pursue somebody because of who they're connected to, it's different versus when you pursue somebody because of who they are as a person.
Mm,
And
yeah.
like for me, that's how I was raised. That's who I am. And it's almost fun between me and God because he knows my heart. And so when he says, oh, let me show you something. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like I didn't know. Only God knows I didn't know. You know, and sometimes like now there's artists I respect and admire, and I might like seek them out to work with them and all that because of what they've done. But it's really still for me, it's not because um they're gonna get me somewhere.
Yeah.
No, it's because I genuinely like that artist. I don't give a, excuse my language, I don't give a shit if no one else likes this particular artist. They think the person's trash. It doesn't matter to me. I like the person's music or art or what they've said. And I go that way. I don't care about what someone else thinks about it. And that confidence that has come for me over the years has been always gold. It's always gold. And I think that when you develop a sense of who you are and what you are called to, it can only serve you. It can
Yeah.
only serve you.
Yeah.
And part of living is the fun of not knowing how it's going to show up. That's the create. That's it's so dope. God is the greatest creator of all time. And I like just, getting in that. And we're small. I see us as little gods. So we have this unique ability to duplicate this process. And it's so fun to see how it's going to show up in you
Yeah.
or through you, through
Yeah.
you.
I think there's
Yeah.
the nature of creativity is in every single person by
Me
default
too.
up until, you know, unless you, I don't even want to use the word learn, but you acquire experiences that tamp that down over
Yeah.
time, then that's the only way that I've ever seen someone not be creative. Every child up until, 5 is like a creative genius, they're just coming up with stuff,
Exactly.
saying stuff. They say things like out of the what's seemingly out of the blue, and then you're like, was that literally meant for me to hear? Because I needed, so many times I've been around, nieces and nephews, and they'll say something and you're like, man, was that like a direct line of like, hey, here's a sign, boop, 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 so
Absolutely.
pretty amazing. Let's see, because you've answered quite a few of these just naturally, which is
I
great.
love these questions. I
Yeah,
love it.
thank you. What role does continuous learning and skill development play in your artistic journey? I know you talked about
Oh,
being a teacher, substitute
yeah,
teacher, so clearly learning is a big part of your, also with the science and math from early on. So,
yeah.
um, what would you say like continuous learning and skill development plays for you?
For me, it's crucial because it shows up in my work. Like I'm still growing. I'm still growing. I'm still challenged every time. I still look at things and go, oh, I could have done this differently, or, okay, now I learned for the next time. I can't wait to apply what I learned next time.
Mm.
So it's a constant desire to improve upon the work, to articulate better what's in my head and translate it into the world. I'm a reader. I love listening. Uh, I like being inspired by other artists. Uh, just tapping into spaces that I don't know about. And, you know, um, I'm a big fan of international cinema. I've learned a lot from watching international cinema. My uncle, he introduced me to international cinema years ago, and I became obsessed with, oh, there's a whole, like, because, it's like, oh, America's the great Hollywood. We put out all these films. And when I realized that's not true. It's other, when I learned that years ago, I just was obsessed. And when he sat me down to watch this film, I was like, man, I don't want to watch this and read these subtitles. But it opened me up to a whole new world. So just the fact that I could literally go into a country like France and spend my whole life in French cinema and never get it all into my head. And so then you multiply that by all the countries in the world and all the different people, like that's many lifetimes. So there's so much to learn. You
That's
know?
huge. That's a huge thing for a realization for to have, because I
Yeah.
think the same thing applies to, you know, history, world history, technology, all these things. When you start opening up your consciousness to the idea that there's just so much more, once you get past that, it's like being in a library and realizing you can't possibly read every book
That's it.
that's in there, but it doesn't mean you have to lose that sense of awe or wonder, because for some people, that feeling will hit them and they're like, I'm just going to stay in my lane. This is the only thing I'll ever know. I don't need any more than this. And it's like, well, you should have take little pieces of that, and see that there's full cultures, there are full lifetime, multiple lifetimes going back. I mean, you could get
Yeah.
cosmic about the whole thing and start thinking that in that regard, but yeah,
Yeah.
it is like, it can be overwhelming, but also it can be really empowering and uplifting at the same time.
It's fun because then you have a lifetime of a journey that you get to go on, and it's not going to run out.
Mm, yeah.
So you're not going to run out.
Let me try to rapid
That's
fire a
comforting.
couple. I'm sorry, say again.
I said that's comforting to me,
Yeah.
you know.
What's beautiful, I think it's more connection with people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think, eh, from marketing and from media stuff, if it bleeds, it leads, right? That's the
Yeah.
kind of the mentality that people have regarding things, and then that creates a very potent us versus them mentality, which then
Yeah.
is a very controlling element in any society. When people start to kind of step back from that and have like a bit of a bird's eye view and realize, you like, even just talking about film, like there's a whole infinite world of film and perspective, that if you were to slowly start to tap into that, then you feel more connected to people, you feel more connected to, believing and understanding that, out of the nearly 8 billion people on this planet, you can connect,
Absolutely.
yeah. um, I wanted to ask, how do you approach self-care, regarding kind of mental, physical, spiritual, all three, some variation?
So I try to rest a lot. I try to literally
Physical
rest,
rest.
physical rest, mental rest. So that means I'm like alone, um, sometimes in my bed, sometimes, in some grass, or Like I love being in a park and just being there. Shutting everything else out is hard because we have our cell phones and everybody can reach you, and you create patterns where people feel like they can reach you because you set it up that way. I've set it up that way. So resting is crucial. Um, Live music for me, that's my dog, sorry. Live music for me is crucial. That's my number one probably thing I enjoy, which hasn't always been that way. You know, it was movies, but I'll take live music all day. Um, I like yoga when I can do it. I love yoga. I want to get back to doing it at minimum 3 times a week. Um, Prayer, listening to inspirational, whether it's a sermon, a speech, um, positive, you know, inspirational type messaging. Um, those are things that I enjoy. Nature became huge for me.
Mm,
Like taking my socks off, putting my feet on the ground or in some grass, like that is like an instant medicine that goes through my body and grounds me, and I have to do that.
nice.
Yeah,
So we have about 15 more minutes. I hate to cut it short only because I have another a guest right
no,
after. But
no
I'm going to
problem.
kind of try to rapid fire through this. What strategies do you use to market and promote yourself to a wider audience?
Definitely Instagram is huge. It's my favorite social media platform. You double it through with Facebook, so automatic post goes to Facebook.
Hmm.
um, yeah, I would say that's number one.
Okay. What resources, such as books, workshops, online communities, um, have been particularly valuable for your growth as an artist?
So I'm in a couple of organizations. One is Film Fatales that my dear sister friend Artistry McKinday introduced me to. Um, Hugh, it's an online platform. One of my dear friends, Kristen Carter, is a creator admin for. I think she might have a co-creator, but it was because of her that I'm in there. Um, Brown Girls Doc. There's a bunch of like networks, social media networks I participate in. The three A's, my friend Rodney, Charles, and Francis, and Osei are part of. That's at AFI. I haven't, these are early on, so some I'm participating in more than others. I've always been a volunteer back in the day at film festivals. That was one of the places I started to learn more. Like I
Mm,
volunteered at Urban World, Pan African, uh, years ago, and then before I started participating. Um, and as far as books go, I read. I love autobiographies of artists that I am into, um, and any like just anything that tickles me. I'm gonna look into it, and then I'll go dig up the behind of that thing. I'll go dig
okay,
up the more materials on. Yeah,
nice. Um, what
and
motivates?
libraries. I'm a big fan
Okay,
of
yeah,
libraries as
libraries.
well.
I love that. Well, it has a
Yeah,
little bit of everything, so
yeah,
and it's usually can be a quiet place as well to go and
yeah.
kind of get your work done. Um, what motivates you to keep going, to continue walking the path that you're on?
Couple of things. My mother. If you know me, you know I love my mother. My film company is called Jomaja. It represents the women, the lineage in my family. The Jo stands for Johnny, my great grandmother. The O is for Olivia, my grandmother. The MA is for Maxine, my mother, and the JA is for Jamie. So that's the name of my film company. So I'm motivated to represent who we are, and to leave some pieces in the planet that give you insight into our existence.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
How do you deal with failures, mistakes, regrets?
ultimately own them. Sometimes it's easier and goes faster to own them, but owning them allows me to learn and move past and incorporate that lesson so that I cannot repeat it. So yeah, I'll say, I'll just leave it right there. Own them.
That's good. How do you celebrate victories, accomplishments, good ideas?
Work hard, play hard. So I play.
Okay.
I went to New York City this summer. I used to live there. It's my dear. It's a dear place in my heart. I went there to celebrate the 50th anniversary of hip hop. I spent 2 weeks with. I still like these earrings are from that time. My gold chains with my Pumas on, and just going to all over the city listening to the people I grew up with.
Did you have the full
And
tracksuit?
I didn't have a tracksuit. I did do the B girl pose on
Yeah.
Sedgwick. I mean, I saw so many people, like it was heaven. I saw all the people that had me writing rhymes when I was a kid,
Mm.
and to be able to give them their due um, was great. And that's play. That's play for me. So I play hard. I work hard, but I play hard. I'll travel. The things I like to do, I go in. Go deep into them.
Yeah. What advice do you have for someone who is just starting on their journey as an artist?
Stay humble. Stay a student, even when you start to master things. Um, Remember the cycle: learn and apply. Don't just learn and that's it. Put it to use. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Um, Read, study, open yourself up that you may not know everything. um, and as everyone says, believe in yourself. Don't tell yourself no. If other people have told you no, okay, but don't tell yourself no unless you tell yourself no. Like, let it come from you.
Hmm. Yeah, really, really listening basically to what that is. Um, how do you envision your artistic journey evolving in the future?
I envision my art reaching more people, um, and creating change, changing the way people think for the better, or having them consider new thoughts or be introduced to new things, um, new nuances is within culture, um, and just I anticipate my art just. I want someone to be able to look and to be able to see my growth and say, oh, okay, I saw when she did this or when she learned that. And I want it to, more importantly, the messages, the way they're coming into my heart to land in the hearts of people and help them live in a better way.
What do you think is the most misunderstood thing about you?
I should say the first thing that came to my head, so I will. That I think I know everything. It's very interesting that criticism. Um, I've heard that criticism throughout my life, and it's almost like you are penalized for having the desire and pursuing a wealth of knowledge. So just because I might know a lot about a little, um, it shouldn't be looked down upon, because for me, I'm trying to share what I know. That's always my intention with my family, with friends. I'm trying to share what I know. And I want to know what you know, and I want to know what I don't know. Um, but I've learned that it doesn't bother me anymore. That used to bother me, but I realized that's their misunderstanding of me, and that's really a compliment. When someone says that, they don't really say it now, or if they do behind my back, I don't know. But it's a compliment because they're telling me, hey, you know a lot. It's a weird way to express. And and it's just because I have an insatiable desire to learn. That's how I was raised. My mother put that in me. She was reading to me. I was speaking pretty well when I started to talk, and I've been in books are my thing. And I grew up. My favorite thing to do with my mom, one of them, was to go into the library. Like we would walk to the library. Like since I was a child, I went to the libraries. So I should know some things after all these years,
It's
So
interesting.
thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting to uh sometimes the pursuit of excellence or having knowledge in regard to certain subjects can be off-putting for people,
Yeah,
because they maybe don't understand the intention behind it. But me knowing you and having worked with you, I know that that's something that's always been positive. So I
thank
see
you.
that about you. um, Coffee, tea, or something else?
Tea,
Okay, good
tea.
to know. All right, so
I'm a
we
tea.
got a little bit of time left for the one last thing that I like to do, called cosmic roll of the dice. So basically, I have 20
All right.
questions that are like, can tap into that Howard University philosophy class that you took. So it's like artistic
All right.
philosophy. So I'm going to roll these dice. Whatever the number comes up, I'm going to pick the corresponding question, and that's the one I'm going to ask you. All right, here we go.
Okay.
All right, let me see. 10, 11, 12, 13. Right? Let me make sure I'm counting that correctly. All right, here we go. 13. Can art exist without an audience? Is the act of creating art inherently tied to the act of sharing it with others?
Ooh, that's an interesting question because you first have to envision if there were no one else, if it were just you, would could art exist? And I would lean into say I'm sure it could. Um, but for me, the art is just as important as sharing. It's so funny for Breathe. Um, I'm gonna say it here first. Breathe is an Eric Garner short film. Breathe Conversations is the Q&A that must follow. And I said it in an interview differently, which is the film is just as important as the Q&A, um, because I want to make sure that people have an opportunity to express, to dig into what I'm asking of them, to 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 just deal with their thoughts on what they're going to see. So I think art and sharing, for me, part of the joy is sharing. I guess, and now what's happening in my head, I'm going back to show and tell. When we're little kids, right?
That's so
Show and
funny.
tell.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
used to like, it wasn't just show, you had to tell. And you were like, I want to get something cool. I want to have the cool thing for show and tell. And the tell was important. It's like, you
It was the
know,
communal feedback.
it's the communal feedback, it's the sharing, it's the, opportunity to have another point of view, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this. I absolutely appreciate your time, you being here. Your perspective on things is refreshing, and it's nice. I'm very happy to share this with everyone that's listening. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the project, doing the stunt coordinating and being in it. And, it was enlightening for me, and it was an experience that leveled me up in what I do. So I'm extremely appreciative to you for that. And genuinely feel blessed that we had a chance to work together. And I'm sure we'll do it again at some point.
I want to say it is my pleasure. You were a gift to me. um your attitude was everything. your capacity and willingness to make this be the best it could be uh, was just is still, as I reflect on it, so special. And it's not, everyone doesn't operate that way. And I recognize that. And you're super talented. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. I'm so grateful to Greg Alexander, our casting director, who knew what your talents were and right away was like our friend, and just to find out that you were, had the stunt coordinating skills was like, what? And you offered, and we had someone initially that had to drop out, but it was meant to be how it happened. So thank you. And hopefully you will like what you see.
Thank you.